Hi, everybody. Today is Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. This is the WG K8s Infra Kubernetes Infrastructure Working Group biweekly meeting. It is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube publicly later. During this meeting, we are expected to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which basically means be our very best selves to each other. If you have any problems with the conduct of this meeting, please reach out to conduct@kubernetes.io. Or you are also free to reach out to the working group leads, WG K8s Infra leads at kubernetes.io. I have no idea what's on today's agenda, so I will just start with that. Did somebody have something they wanted to launch right into, or do you want to give me a minute to go find it?
I'm sharing my screen. If you want to, I'll roll that for you.
I think you may have lost sharing. You should reattempt it.
Good. Okay, so if I lost sharing because on my slide it's not reacting. Okay, so I'm not sharing. It's good. Then let Aaron roll with it.
Okay, sorry, y'all. Okay, I see Rianne was about to run the meeting. That's cool. Okay, first off, let me welcome any new members. I feel like I see a couple new faces here. Would anybody like to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're interested in? Or we can move right along. I posted a link to the meeting notes in Zoom chat if you want to sign yourself in as an attendee. And if somebody wants to be awesome and take notes along the way, I find I cannot talk and type at the same time. So the other thing we typically do at the beginning of each meeting is we go through and review our billing report. Tim Hawkin tends to also take a look at the actual GCP billing console to see if things line up. I feel like we are basically at the point where I feel comfortable not needing to do that sanity check or that comparison anymore.
I'm with you. We've been within spitting distance for the last 12 plus months. So yeah. I'm pretty confident that the billing report is not egregiously wrong.
So for what it's worth, our total spend over the past 28 days has been about 140 grand. And it sure doesn't seem like it has changed too substantially over time. I can just sort of quickly try and do year to date, give us some sense of what that growth has looked like. So we're at about 610 grand year to date. So if I think of our annual burn rate, or if I were to pretend that our budget started on January 1st, and I thought of our budget as 3 million in GCP credits, we are about 20% of the way through that. And we are whatever 5 over 12 is. We're like 45-ish% through the year. That seems okay. Are there any particular questions?
I'll just add it seems okay, but we are contemplating moving other things into the bucket, which will give us new base levels.
Yes, I agree. So I'll stop sharing that if there aren't any specific questions. Yeah, and maybe we can come back to that because I'm sure some of the II folks have some questions about billing data. I've seen a lot of questions about sort of access to how that report is generated, I think. Okay. Are there any action items from the last meeting that we need to follow up on? I'm looking back in the meeting notes. The last meeting was April 28th. let's see. There was discussion about triaging issues for 122. I personally still haven't had the time to go through that and sweep extensively, but I am working on it. I know Arnaud has done some of that. Maybe we can wait for Arnaud to show up. Vulnerability scanning will be billing for vulnerability scanning. So the way I looked into this issue a little bit, I will see if I can find the issue that Tim's opened. My read is that it's about 2.5 to 1.7% of our spend in total. So I'm not like completely flipping out over the amount of money we're spending on it. But I do agree, if we're not using a service, we should disable it. And I've had a PR in flight that I'm trying to like get more comfortable with having a function or a tool that you specify what services we expect to be enabled, and it will automatically disable everything else. The reason I don't have that happening by default all the time everywhere is there are a number of services that are active in some of our like production-y type projects. And I don't want to surprise somebody by shutting down something that turned out to be extremely critical. It just wasn't documented at all. So I'm working on that, and I'm using this as an excuse to iterate a little bit. But if we get too close to the deadline by which it's a soft rollout of billing. So after, I think it's like May 19th or something, we start to be billed at 50. And then sometime in July, we start to be billed at 100% for it. So if we get too close to that, I'll just write a script to blow through everything and disable it everywhere. But the TLDR is the CI images project is the vast majority of our spend. It's not clear to me. Yeah, we can maybe think about usage patterns later. That seems like we shouldn't have continuous security scanning of every image of Kubernetes that's produced for every commit of Kubernetes if we wanted to be mindful of costs. It seems more like the sort of thing that could happen on like a nightly basis or periodically or something. And then that would bring that one project way, way, way more in line with everything else. Let's see, were there any other actions? Somebody was going to reach out to SIGs to get whether we have all staging repositories promoted to k8s.gcr.io. I don't know if anybody's done that. I didn't actually see an issue about doing that. That sounds like a great thing that the release engineering could help us out with. I feel like maybe they already have a tool. And then there was apparently a working session on April 29th. I missed that. Okay, so I'll stop there. Any questions about action items, or does anybody know of anything that we should have addressed by today?
I don't have anything else. The working meeting had a fair amount that we went through, but no, there was not any other action items I remember from that needed.
Okay.
Reaching out to the SIGs, I think, was the big, but we knew it was a longer open thing that was going to take time.
Sure. I don't suppose that was, you know what, I'll follow up with Arnaud offline. I don't know if it was like documented anywhere. Okay, so Rhiannon, you want to talk about PII and data discovery? What can be shared in the community? I would say, like, don't name specific IP addresses and don't name companies. So I'm not sure that I would talk about like which ASNs are downloading things the most. Does that seem fair to you, Tim?
I think that's a good starting point. I mean, generally IP addresses are considered PII by anybody who's doing same PII policy, right? So not publishing individual IP addresses is obvious. Not publishing ASNs, maybe a little less obvious, but maybe not a whole lot. It still seems pretty questionable, or I feel like it's interesting information. I'm just not sure it's necessary information, and the chance of exposing something that, you know, somebody made a mistake, and that we want to be respectful of that. So I guess I agree with what you're saying. I'm also questioning whether we want to human filter anything we release first, or whether we want to automatically release. Like, let's say, for example, the top #1 image was AWS something, right? And for historical reasons, it was one of the images that we're pushing. Probably shouldn't have been, but it was. And it becomes the top #1 image. That says something about the way people are using it and the way potentially vendors are using it. Now, they're using a public service, GCR, so maybe we shouldn't feel too bad about it, but I do. And I would prefer that if we were to produce a report and we saw that, oh, that's strange, that we might human filter that and actually do a reach out to the AWS folks and say, hey, did you know that it seems like a large number of your clusters, perhaps your managed service, are pulling a particular image? Maybe you should look at that.
I guess.
Is that too far?
No, I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure I want to try and solutioneer our policy on the fly here. I think I want to kind of step back and suggest that, like, this is the very first time we're going to talk about something that's potentially sensitive. Like, pretend like we are about to discuss all of the CVEs that all of our infrastructure has right now that are unaddressed. Is this the sort of thing that we would want in a publicly recorded meeting posted to YouTube? I feel like we would want to try a couple trial runs and then review whether everything's okay, which I can do since I typically review these videos before I post them for recording. So if there's anything that's sensitive, I'm just gonna cut it. And I expect everybody who's attending here to use their best judgment. I think if it comes to committing stuff to the repo, that needs to happen someplace. We need to talk about how to do that privately before checking it in publicly. Does that sound, does that as a meta policy make sense to y'all? Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think one of the other things is, where is this the meeting to discuss those things? Or do we have a closed session?
No. I said, like, we can go forward. I just wanted to try and, like, establish the ground rules here. And I feel like I personally still haven't actually looked through all the full legal document that CNCF has sent, but I think, like, we owe the community some kind of docs and policies around how we're going to operate with this. Like, y'all are our guinea pigs. So I'm sorry about that. But, you know, we like to merge and iterate on everything else. So why not this? Okay.
One thing that we did in temporary is to create a private repository that right now is sitting at II. And the only people I knew that we have to have in that would be the chairs of this SIG.
Yes, I think that's a great, I think that's a great place to collaborate. And
okay.
We can talk more about that offline.
Beautiful.
And also and that's part of the reason why I put it in, because I really want to be respectful of what we show and not show and get the buy-in. And also, it would not be wise of me to get all the data ready and say, these are the main of whatever, and I've got something wrong with my data.
Yeah, dude.
I really don't want to go.
That's fine.
That.
It's fine.
So
I made you co-host.
So at the moment, from the
screen to talk about this stuff, by the way.
I could show. Let me. Hippie, would you like me to just show the highlights? I did block out all the sensitive data. So let me share that screen. Let's do this. Share screen. And I'm going to share that screen there. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. So first up, which I think should not be sensitive data, which we did discuss in the chat in Slack, that we don't have a way to link this back to specific images yet. But interesting to see the highest hitting image got 7,700,000 downloads, 700,000 downloads. It's only 16 megabytes size of the image, and total GBs is 128. So there's some interesting information here. And then also the one down is the highlight the number of downloads for top 10 images. The one is the top 10 data. So that's the difference there. So
what is the time period this is over?
Slide.
1 month.
This
Okay.
is not exactly what it's basically April, but I filtered the dates.
That's fine.
To just be sure.
I just wanted to be clear if it was
April,
per day, per week, or per month.
Sure.
Yeah, it's for the period of 9 April to 21 April. That's what we have in the current data set. We're working on making a running data set and automating to pull in the data to keep it fresh and live. So this is, as I said, amount of data downloaded per image, and then that is the volume of downloads, the count of downloads. So the most popular image got 85 million downloads. Then looking at the second page, we've got the IPs related to this. You'll see the highest hitting IP downloaded 23 different images, 9,000 GBs of data, and 1,800,000 downloads. Then top 10 IPs by total volume of downloads. So the biggest, and it's a bit of a copy of the one at the top for the first half, and the rest there's some changes starting to come in by volume.
Is that by specific IP? Sorry, is that by specific IP or by ASN? Okay.
No, that's by specific IP. So this is a single IP address downloaded 1.8 million. It's just one IP address that downloaded that. Then looking at ASNs. So here I've got them split by ASNs. One of the problems that we're busy having, we got a data dump that we're going to look again at today. We're struggling a little to get all IPs linked to ASNs. So I've got 450 million IPs that do not have specific ASNs signed, which we hope to resolve soon. Then the next one in the queue downloaded, if we look at the price at which the downloads go according to the billing report, is 0.08 US per GB. So taking into account the first IP that I could, ASN that I could actually marry to a data set, that's 138,000 GBs, $11,000 worth of downloads, and it's 24 million downloads for that IP or for that ASN.
And we recognize how many of these, Rian, in this top 20?
In the top 20, the first 5 or 6 is very well known. It's well-known companies in the community. For the first 5, 6, thereafter it's becoming all sorts of different companies that's I don't bump into regularly into the community. But do
you see the same company? Do you see the same company popping up multiple times via multiple ASNs in this first 20 data set?
Yes, yes. That's the next thing I want to say is I think number 3 and 5, if I remember correctly now, is this the same company, but it's different ASN. So we're trying to marry now ASN name of the network ASN network name to specific companies, so we can actually have company ABC and the company specific. So we want to try and lump the ASN belonging to, say, Amazon or Packet or Google, or get all their ASNs together, so I can say, okay, any specific vendor is using X amount of resources. That's where I'm aiming to go next.
Why? Why do we need to get into that specific?
Each company, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Aaron, I think what you're asking is, why do we need to know instead of per ASN, but per company?
A little bit. I guess I'm wondering why we need to be this granular about this. I would view I would want to use this data to answer two questions. One, is somebody being abusive? If so, let's figure out how to wear that down. Two, I think the goal that CNCF cares about is how much money could we save if we didn't have to pay egress to external cloud providers? Therefore, like theoretically, so I could see you need to know like who is capable of hosting their own mirror such that they don't have to pay egress to get container images. So I would try to boil it down though to that question. The specific companies is, yeah, that's a great discussion to have amongst CNCF leadership, and I think K8s Infra leads can be involved in that. But like, I really don't know that it's worth getting into the long tail of like every company and so on and so forth. And even then, right, that's a max potential cost savings ballpark.
Definitely. I don't think we're trying to do it for every company in the world, but definitely trying to get that ASN map. And some companies in this larger list aren't contributing the list of their ASNs.
Sure, of course.
Identify this larger list and publish those results.
It's just the sort of thing where like I feel like in the abstract, to help us guide some sort of ballpark decision making, we're going to want to know like the really abusive outliers, and then we're kind of want to know, you know, I don't know if it's like 1090 or 2080, but there's going to be like, imagine we could just magically take the top N of these and make that cost disappear. What does that new cost like? What does that new cost look like?
Yeah, really, it's the like how tall is the first few items in that distribution curve, right? And like there must be some statistical name for it, but I'm not a stats person. But like the amplitude between the median and the peak, or something like that. In relative
plan
terms.
is I want to do a Pareto analysis, which is basically saying normally statistically 80% of your hitters would, or 20% of your hitters would cause 80% of your cost. In most data sets, you have something like that 20% of the consumers is responsible for 80% of whatever is going on. So we're looking to catch what is that, specifically as you say, Tim, what is that 20%? And again, what value we can derive out of cooperating with that 20% just in structuring the traffic different and with those specific companies. So that is why we're aiming towards knowing exactly who's doing what. It's not to point anybody out, and that's why we don't want to show any names now, because we're not solid on the data. And also we want to privately first discuss the data. And I think there's a very good path to try and cut costs by engaging those people once we identify them.
Yes, so I hear you there. I think the other reaction you're seeing from me is I just want to understand from a priority perspective how much time it is worth investing in getting higher and higher fidelity results here versus sort of prototyping. This is assuming we can just magically build something that is cross-cloud artifact hosting. And so I want to make sure that at some point we realize, well, ballpark, here's how much we think we can save if we get that. Now let's go figure out how we're going to accomplish that.
And let's also be clear, we can do two different analyses, right? We can do the one that says, look, we know that 86.2% of the traffic is coming from these three ASNs, which are linked to these three companies. And we can go out to those companies with the CNCF hat on and say, we really think you need to run a mirror because here's the data, right? And in fine-grained data, here's what you're doing. Go do that. That's not for public consumption, I think, because we just don't want to name and shame, and there's who knows what information in there. And then there's the more anonymized statistical stuff that I think should be for public consumption. We should produce a report of the, you know, sufficiently anonymized and delabeled information.
I think part of that it is important to know who those players are. because each of them probably have a strong opinion of what that would look like for them. And I think identifying those top three, because I know we're talking about something that's cross cloud everywhere, but I think we're going to get some pushback from some of these vendors on deploying something that's not what's their, I don't know, let's say their flagship offering or something that maybe we promote to that.
Okay.
It's one of those things. We could say, well, if you want to run it, here's the solution you need to run. And I feel that's maybe being a bit prescriptive for their solution versus saying you need some solution that accepts our 302 redirects from our distribution engine. And here's the interface to that.
I view this as like a risk mitigation thing then, I guess. I would assume if you're, and I apologize, I'm not like in the weeds with your design docs. I would assume if you've got a design doc about this, it's like, well, here's an approach of rolling our own. Here's an approach of using hosted offerings from major cloud providers, because we'll just assume at the outside that a couple major cloud providers are there. And then we're going to assume that there are one or two companies that are just going to need some way of hosting their own mirror. So then you can sort of proof of concept what those things look like. Or it could be that you need this analysis to inform which of those implementations are worth exploring and like proving out. But I feel like you could probably guess off the top of your head which hosted services, but I'll put it this way. I would guess I would want to look at something that works in Amazon and something that works in Microsoft. Those are two other clouds that come to mind. And then something that works for a bare metal environment. And then I would want to start thinking about how, what is it, build versus buy, and how we're routing traffic and all that stuff. So then I use the analysis to kind of prune that tree of like, which branches do I need to explore and how deeply. But I still feel like you can probably crawl that tree for quite a while in parallel to the analysis.
I think it's going to be more than one or two that want to use their thing without. And so if I were to look at what I see the design document, we're going to need something that 302s to in-house for bigger vendors. I think part of that is there's a reluctance to deploy service when they have something, right?
Yeah.
the build versus buy. So
yes, I
we
agree.
can pretty much prune it back for at least a few of those. We need a 302 to work with the bigger players.
Yes.
And having the promotion process from SIG release, in either if it's just a 302 redirect, then that whole process of where our artifacts live and the mapping of those SHAs is almost like an input in a way to this to the redirect. Because we got this stuff all living in GCS buckets now, and then how do they basically have a mirror that is up to date at the moments when we do our CIP promotion process. It's almost as if the promotion from those buckets that are staging into production happens at the same time for all of those providers, if everybody's running their own fancy solution or built or in-house solution. And for those that don't, then there's probably a mirroring or a caching one that would hit by default, where they still deploy one and we still can set it up to go to them. But rather than pushing it out there, because we don't want to be, then it gets more complex every time we add another mirror of pushing to them when we do a promote. It's just open for thoughts, but
yeah, so I don't want to drag us on because I do want to be respectful of the other things we have on our agenda. I guess, because everything you're saying, again, this is me like kind of seagulling in with an opinion, which I know is an anti-pattern. So just take it with the appropriately sized grain of salt. But I want to make sure, it just feels an awful lot like I'm seeing y'all frame sufficient analysis of GCS access logs as a blocker to trialing implementations of a promotion workflow and a redirector that can work with a couple best guesses at proprietary hosting services or mirrors.
It's probably just noisier because we're blocked there and we're not blocked on the other.
Okay. So this sounds cool. So pull back. This is interesting data. I would love to continue to see aggregate analysis, but if I hear everything I just said, I think I want to understand, like, it will be helpful for me to understand how this data is helping you act and decide. I have lost too much of my life to looking at interesting data for interesting sake, and it's really fun. But I know we have a purpose here. So, any other questions on that, or shall we move on to Berno?
It's clear. Thank you.
All right.
I think I've captured the notes on that. Berno, do you want to go ahead with your exporting?
Yeah. I think mine is fairly straightforward. I think the ticket is still known for exporting to just get the Terraform that we have for existing things. I still get an IAM permission error on that. The ticket is still open for that. But I think that's okay. Or I want to understand or kind of get feedback. Is that still into weeds that's not particularly pertaining to image moving? We're more trying to understand specifics on the infrastructure and the bucket and the things that currently exist so that we can set up for moving. Is there a better way to get to that, or?
So I'm legit not sure. I think, like, there's an umbrella issue out there somewhere about, like, our audit script takes way too long to run, and we should find ways to improve it. And then it also talks about a bunch of ideas like, wouldn't it be great if the output in which we dumped our things was really close to the output that, or the input that we use to create our things? And so sometimes that leads us to, like, oh crap, let's just use Terraform. We'll write all the Terraform things and then we'll just diff them against the Terraform input things, and boom, it's Terraform everything. That's great. It's just, there's all this other Terraform stuff we're gonna have to figure out, like modules and how we interact with it and stuff. So then, like, there may be some other G-Cloud commands from the Cloud Asset Inventory Service that could dump most everything, not everything, but most everything really, really quickly to take us down from, like, when somebody runs a script after a PR merges, like, it'd be cool to find out within like 10 to 30 minutes what they did, as opposed to like 6 hours after the fact. There's also this crazy stuff where, like, Cloud Asset Inventory can actually send notifications to a pub sub channel about everything that's happening within your organization or projects. We could create something super duper advanced here, but I think it's ultimately about making it less likely for infrastructure and whatnot to fall through the cracks. And I think y'all have a great opportunity to iterate on, like, a smaller proof of concept, because as you're playing around with stuff in your sandbox, you don't have a bunch of pre-built infrastructure that you have to maintain as it is and go through the migration process of taking it to something else. So if you want to find ways to experiment with the input and the output are basically the same, and that makes, like, diffing and auditing and all sorts of other policy enforcement stuff, like, way easier. That sounds awesome. So there's that piece. The second thing is, like, I definitely want to help you out with this, but my bandwidth is very slim. So things that can help are when it tells you you're missing a permission. There are pages in Google Cloud's documentation that specifically enumerate all of the permissions for a given service. And there's another page that, like, says, like, this role gives you all of these permissions. And then I think using that information, you could take an educated guess and open up a pull request against some of the custom role specifications that we have. The intent is the auditor role that is assigned to a couple of people within the working group and a couple of people within II is supposed to give, like, view access or read access to everything except secret or sensitive data, but you should. So that would be the example could be like, you can list that there are secrets within a project. You just can't see the contents of those secrets. Now, most permissions have the word get and list in them, but maybe not all of them do. So maybe we've missed a few things. But I feel like these are all things that you should have the power to open a pull request, and then we can review and click and have it deploy that way.
Good. Yeah.
Have I answered your questions and concerns?
Yeah, good feedback. I can dig in more. I did look at the specific things, but I'm not sure about the boundary of, well, this is pedantic, you don't need to tell me the things, or this will be really helpful. And this gives me a actually get the PR up with the things that you want. And we're happy to help look at that. But yeah, I'm not going to search for your permissions for you. That's good.
That's helpful. Like I have been trying to go through and document why we need the permissions that we need, because even in the early days of this working group, like people just sort of assigned some roles and created some things without documenting why they're needed. So I'm just trying to converge us to that. And I think having that kind of conversation on pull requests is super helpful. I wish I was more familiar with the tools that you're using, but I'm not. So typically when you're asking questions, I would have to do the same Googling and reading of documents that you would. But I'm happy to try and take educated guesses when I have the bandwidth.
I appreciate direct feedback, and especially for these kind of things, I'm more intimidated by asking something that is, you're going to sit behind the scenes and figure it out, rather than tell me, hey, this is a way to make it simple for me. So this kind of feedback helps a lot. Like I can work a lot faster on, this is places that you can give me the things that I need. I'm happy to engage there, but don't.
Sure.
Broad scope. So keep this coming, like, please. As you see things that, like, if you direct in this direction, that helps me. And I know your bandwidth is very much to coach as well, but that helps.
Thank you. Okay, Arno, you've had your hand up forever. Please say words.
Yeah, basically, for Brian, I made a comment in the issue you opened about the ID or you use. Did you change that and try it again? You had the same issue?
I did in that. I made a comment at the bottom. Let me check where I tried it again. I've not since then.
Okay, we can look at that later privately. Also, I put in the chat the 2 links about basically the GCP roles you need to understand. Basically, there's a list of the full permission for GCP, and there is a repo created by Anand that basically lists all the permission for any role in GCP. So you can basically have a full understanding about everything we use in the repo.
Thank you. Yeah, we can sync after this, or if it's, I know it's getting very late there, we can do tomorrow. Just the chat. I'll send you what. Send me what you have. I'll send you where I am if there's any questions. I think we're okay.
Okay. Also, one thing I want to add to what Aaron said, I feel like basically convert the current K8s Infra infrastructure to Terraform is not really a priority. And I think we should focus on that next year, because basically this year is almost over. After KubeCon and after October, the year is over for everyone, because you have the holidays, you have the Black Friday for everyone. So I feel like switch from Bash to Terraform of the current resources is a very complicated subject. It's very tricky because it's about configuration management for all the projects we have. And I feel like we can basically not do that right now. We should focus on, yeah, AP.
I was wondering, part of this, we're talking about just wanting to do an audit, and the audits are currently public in that group. And I think for us, particularly having no visibility into, for example, the configuration of the cluster itself, or the actual full dump of everything within the project, I would love to find some way where maybe it's not fully public, but for those trying to fully explore and understand how Prow and all the clusters within it are the reality of it, and the full dump Go ahead.
Okay, back up.
Yeah.
How, what project, what are you trying to understand?
So I should probably just roll back to just GCP for now, the Kubernetes public.
Okay,
And
Yeah,
what's
what,
not
what
being
I
dumped in that project?
sorry, say again.
I said, what's not being dumped?
Um,
Or is it like
I did
you
the best I
don't
could
know?
writing the audit script, right? And it is
Yeah.
definitely missing heaps of resources. It is not the best.
Right.
And so when you were talking about we need a better dump, I was thinking that the Terraform dump would help us provide that transparency. And I would, and
So if you are interested in doing this, I would encourage you to take a look at the resources that are provided by Terraform, by the config resource config bulk export command,
Mhm.
and by G-Clouds or by Google Cloud Asset Inventory. It'd be great if one of them had everything, or if some combination of them had everything. My cynicism is saying like they're all going to have different subsets. Terraformer I looked at Terraformer. I think we as a group looked at Terraformer like 2 years ago, and at the time they didn't support everything that we needed. That may have changed, and if it has, that is great.
Pretty full out. I'd love to be able just to run the commands to see. I mean, I know we could try to go through and document, but I also feel like I'm more of an introspective look through the data.
Yeah, so again, that is the intent and purpose of the audit role that you and a number of other people are assigned to. And if it is not giving you read-only access to everything, that is a bug, and we should fix that.
Thank you for that, Aaron. That makes it much more clear to me.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna move on a little bit more quickly. So Caleb, you wanted to talk about a GKE cluster with Prow and a GCS bucket and stuff. Before I ask you why, but I will ask you why, I will mention that Arnaud is trying to work on Prow running in the Kubernetes public project on the AAA cluster, and get that working is kind of like just a sort of prototype-y, stagey instance of Prow that could one day replace prow.k8s.io. And I have zero problems with job configs being put inside of the Kubernetes test infra repo inside of the WG K8s Infra directory to do WG K8s Infra specific stuff. I also have no problem with jobs that need specific credentials to specific databases to run in the trusted cluster, since that's the cluster that gets the secrets and the credentials to the things. Now, why do you need a GKE cluster with Prow?
Appreciate the info on what Arnaud is doing. I think that's cool. Yeah, so I've been doing a bit of research trying to learn Prow recently. Prow's very cool. And yeah, so trying to get stuff set up to in the sandbox how we might end up doing things, and this is to do with the getting Prow set up for like syncing of container registries and stuff like that, and try and get an environment up that is similar to what we might be using. Yeah, I've put together like a chart for it, and it's how do I say it? It's a notification. It's quite ready to play around with.
One of the reasons we brought up the II project was to work on the solutions, and so part of that has been us using setting up clusters using GKE and using it in the same way that we do in the public Prow, using Terraform. And then on top of that, we use our own Prow instance to deploy jobs there. We're wanting to do it in a Prow, GCS cluster inside GKE, because our own Prow clusters don't have all the special things like the permissions and whatnot. So as we're developing our solutions, we're doing it inside that project, inside of Kubernetes, inside of as a target for a Prow cluster.
look, I apologize. I really apologize if I'm coming across as a jerk here, because y'all are awesome, and Prow is awesome, and it's really great to explore this. But I question the value of iterating on like yet another Prow deployment. In my head, I think of the fact that you probably have a Prow instance for the CNCF. We have a Prow instance. And I guess I should talk about, like, we have the service cluster, so the thing that actually gets webhooks and you slash commands go to it and stuff, right? So you got one of those running over in CNCF land. You've got one running as prow.k8s.io, and Arnaud is working on getting another one kind of up and running as an intended replacement for prow.k8s.io. Then underneath that, there are also the build clusters, which are where the pods themselves run. And then there's like, service accounts and other pieces of infrastructure you can deploy on the build clusters, like the GitHub cache, or like service accounts that are bound via workload identity to actual GCP service accounts, things like that. So it's just kind of not clear to me what value we have in adding a fourth control plane or a fourth build cluster. I would think of it like if you need something to have permissions to do something someplace else, then we should be talking about, like, we need a GCP service account, and we need to give that GCP service account these permissions, and then we'll bind that service account via workload identity to a Prow cluster, and it could be like the trusted Prow cluster that we currently use to run all of the staging GCP build jobs. It could be the CNCF's Prow build cluster if you feel like you can iterate faster by like having more manual control over that. It's less clear. And so if it's like, well, we want to actually iterate on how we're going to manage the community's Prow cluster, then you should be working with Arnaud. But it's just not clear to me what the value is of setting up another one.
Can I give a little? So I think where this discussion started was the meeting with Arnaud. There came up a fair amount of things of Prow jobs that will be moved. And our Prow cluster we stood up last year was it had one job that we wanted to make sure it did well. It was stood up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Everybody made sure it was documented, did the things. But then it came to, let's start iterating on what we already have and add a little bit more dev work into Prow. And it became a Prow to stand up as a dev environment where I can quickly test things and break things and move on to the next is not a readily available thing at this point. So our discussion went, we can put it into our cluster that we're running currently. And then as part, that evolved into, if we're going to do a Prow cluster for CNCF permanent, kind of have it as this, where we can develop for Prow, understand what we're doing, and move up into a production Prow. So if you already have clusters that do the same things, it was a little bit of isolating ourselves so we don't bump into things that we're asking for permissions to access things. So you say, keep it to the sandbox, do the things where you have all the control. And I think so, if this is going into a wrong direction, that having Prow as a thing that we could hold in our hand easier in terms of deving faster on it was kind of the starting point for it, and hardening what we have for CNCF as this lives in our project here, and we can add and expand it. If we want to add Kettle to this now as a test, that's okay, because this is a cluster that does not talk into anything else for it. So I think we did a little bit of, we want the sandbox to play in, is where and if this is going down a rabbit hole in the end, that while we're talking about images, that needs to probably stay priority. Leave the Prow jobs for things that are specific to that, and we have places to that. That's okay, but that's the thinking how we got to this.
I'm gonna quickly answer to this because we're 2 minutes left in the meetings, and I want Eddie basically 2 minutes to talk about this issue. And Claudio, I'm sorry, you may need to skip the issue you post. Can we talk about this as in Slack, Claudio? Okay, so basically, I think you don't need to use the current cluster used by pro.k8s.io. You can basically create a new GK8 cluster in the Sun project and use it for Prow and for a build cluster with a beginning. You can look at basically the Terraform configuration we made for pro builds in kits.io, and you can start from that.
My understanding, sorry, so kind of what Caleb is working on, pair with you more and make sure that GKE cluster we stand up is in the sandbox, kind of to align with what you're busy doing, standing up the second file, or is this two things? Sorry.
Okay, let's talk after this meeting. I will walk through the process. Is it okay for you, Aaron?
Yeah, and I think I'm in this in alignment. Like, okay, yeah, you get your own build cluster in the sandbox, and you would copy, you would like copy paste something like that, which has the build cluster, and then we can talk about. You were also like, but I just want to be able to like schedule arbitrary prow jobs for testing because the prow development and testing of jobs experience is terrible, and boy, it would be great if the prow team and the SIG testing folks would make that better. And perhaps you have constructive ideas on how we could do that. But in the meantime, yes, it is really convenient if you can just talk to the prow control plane and use the command called mkpj, where you're just like, make this prow job on the prow control plane, and then it will schedule it to your build cluster, which you can then also like kubectl, like look at the pods and look at the logs and like paint them and whatever else. Like, let's do it. That sounds great. But maybe the prow control plane where you have mkpj access to, I don't know if maybe that should be Arno's thing. That's my only thought, but I'll let Arno lead on that.
Okay.
And iterate on what we said earlier. I think a fair amount of what I start with is fear of the things I don't know and the things I might break. So pulling us back to, hey, we've got things that work, and this is how we unblock staying in those things is great. My default is, can I do this on the side so it can then come and get? And it sounds like that is less productive, and it's good feedback.
That's just it's why I'm trying to respond to each of y'all's questions with like, what specific problem are you trying to solve? How, like, where are you blocked? What are you trying to do? And maybe we'll even get to like, why are you trying to do that? What is it you're trying to, anyway? Sorry, Arno, go, relate.
No, I mean, basically, I want to leave Eddie talk about an issue with Amazon. I feel like this is kind of an important thing we need to talk about, because it's been for like 6 months. I see people ping us about Amazon access.
Yeah, so just real quick, I saw the Slack message in the channel. Putting on my employer hat for a minute, I do work for Amazon Web Services. They do pay me to work on Kubernetes. So I don't know who owns any of that accounts, but I can poke bears or badgers, or I can help out however will be, beneficial.
I'm sure it's something really silly, like when we create these projects or VPCs or whatever, they're all getting like default quota, and somebody just needs to go like change all of the quota things. We got to do the same thing for our GCP projects. The thing is, it's like, so the people who actually have the keys to go like use Amazon's console to like look at everything and configure everything is those 3 people in the AWS admins group. Justin Santa Barbara, Ihor, and Tim Hawken. I think that we should be working to expand that group to more responsive people. Tim is extremely overburdened. Justin is responsive, but also can disappear for large periods of time. And Ihor will say yes to anything, which is great, but I would only use that as a tool to unblock ourselves. I would want somebody who like knows what they're doing with AWS and is conscious of the costs and implications of doing things with our AWS account. It's my great hope that one day we can get the same level of visibility and transparency and get ops-driven configuration management of the AWS stuff that we have with the GCP stuff. And Justin has some open PRs, I think, to help with some of that. But like the TLDR is like, if we can't get Justin, then I don't know, do you want to be the person who has the keys, or like who would you suggest that we find to get the keys, right? So it's the conversation needs to go that way.
I definitely don't have any of those answers about cost or is this the right thing to do, but I'm happy to help how I can and poke people and maybe find someone on the Amazon side who wants to do it. So
Sure.
I feel like basically we should start firstly reach out to Justin, because I think he's the one close to unblock this issue, and later talk about how we can expand the people.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Because-
we need another Justin.
Yeah, we need another Justin. So yeah, Eddie, if you can basically ping Justin, talk with Justin and see what is if he can unblock people from, I think, from cops and plus the life cycle, it could be great. And later maybe as an Amazon employee, see how we can basically expand the number of people able to access to this profile. It could be great.
I will reach out to Justin.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry it's like this, but we really appreciate you helping us to make it better. Okay, we're 3 minutes over time. Do we want to call it?
Yes.
All right. Thank you everybody so much for showing up.